I feel like my creative process is constantly changing and evolving, but most of the times my creative process starts out with an idea that usually comes to me at the most random times throughout the day or in the middle of the night, and I always find myself rushing to write it down in my notes or quickly sketch it out so I don't forget it. I always try to visualize my ideas through a rough sketch before I actually go into physically making anything. And then my next step is to source materials, and I primarily use pre-existing materials or recycled fabrics. Sometimes this step is also the first part of my creative process, so I will find a material that I really love and then I get a concept that is inspired from that material. And this was actually the case when I was making this bag. I was trying to think of things that reminded me of capitalism and conformity, and I thought that using receipts in my design would be really interesting. And then this inspired me to make a bag or a purse because they are both symbols of money and consumerism, and they kind of go hand in hand with each other. I don't really know if there is one step that is the most important when I'm finalizing my work, because a lot of the things I make are very experimental. So I'm always experimenting with new fabrics or new material or new designs. So I never really know if it will actually turn out until it either does or it doesn't. As a fashion designer, it can be very confusing to say that I don't support capitalism because the fashion industry is such a large culprit of capitalism. Fast fashion and consumerism are large parts of our society, and it makes it increasingly difficult to avoid conformity and to be creative. I constantly find myself struggling to make something different and unique, but also something that other people will like and want to buy. As an artist and a designer, I'm constantly trying to find the balance between creativity and conformity in order to survive in our capitalist society. As a designer, I try to avoid what makes fashion bad and the part that supports capitalism and focus on the beauty of fashion. Sustainability is extremely important for me when it comes to my designs, and I express this in my work through using pre-existing materials and recycled fabrics. I focus on small batch production and one-of-one design, and I always try to minimize my waste as much as possible. I think if we ever want to see a change in the fashion industry and other creative industries, we must slow down. But again, there is always going to be this constant battle of conforming to industry norms and keeping up with the rapidity of the fashion world in order to make money and to become successful, or by going against this and slowing down. I think my only advice to someone starting in the industry would be to do whatever feels right for you and to stay true to your goals as an artist and a designer. There really is no right or wrong answer. I hope to see more of a focus on smaller designers, smaller brands, and smaller artists, and less of a focus on large corporations. And I also hope to see an end to fast fashion.
So for this illustration, the prompt was basically just to come up with something that has to do with creativity, capitalism, and conformity in relation to Steph Russo's editorial. So after thinking about what can I draw, one of the things that I feel like I have the strongest connection to was the relationship artists and creators have with representing themselves on social media. So for example, one thing I thought about was how like the craze about the algorithm. So once upon a time, it was the amount of likes you have that dictate how quote unquote good your work is, if I were to oversimplify and generalize it. And then eventually it became how many shares your post has, and then it became how many saves you have. So then these are things that tell Instagram how to automatically spread your work along different feeds that don't already follow you. And so obviously exposure and being presented on other people's feeds is the way that you get recognized and potentially get work or more opportunities. So in order to meet these needs, I guess, you have to, one would likely mold their habits or their art styles or their creative works in order to optimize, I guess, the use of the algorithms or something. I know that, for example, for me, I'm not much of a content creator when it comes to my art account. My art account for me acts more as just a place for People are interested in my artwork, but I don't post consistently. I don't really care about making art so people can like it all the time and share it, whatever. Like, obviously those are nice things, but I don't post for those reasons. And so at the moment, I'm not bothered by it. But in the past, I've dabbled between opening up a art account and deleting it, and opening another one, deleting it, because I always think like, oh, you know, a lot of the times the stuff that I really, really like to draw or whatever doesn't get enough likes, or people don't seem to like it. And then I start to think like, oh, because of that fact, these things that I like to do the most are not worthy, or think like, I just start to think about things like that. So basically, to try and represent this in my drawing, it's a person drawing there in the middle, and then in the front you have a bunch of phones on an Instagram profile. I don't want to talk too much about the meaning of it because I feel like it's best to leave it open for interpretation, but you know, why can't we just enjoy our creativity separate from how Instagram makes us think we should?
So my creative process always starts from a sketch or a very rough idea drawn out, like on a piece of paper or on my iPad. And from there, I transfer onto Photoshop or Illustrator, and I start to play around with different elements just to see what would work best with what. And I guess the most important part about finalizing my work is just making sure that everything is cohesive and also ties into my original idea. My perspective on capitalism and conformity basically revolves about the idea of how we are constantly stuck in this loop. What I mean by that is that a lot of the time we're stuck in a job or stuck in a project that we don't like, and we feel like we need an escape of happiness or something that gets our minds off that job or work life. So oftentimes we buy those material things to fill our void, and once we buy those things, we don't have enough money, so we are constantly in the cycle of replenishing what we don't have. And that is really what I define capitalism as. There's so many different ways of advertising and marketing products that are specifically designed to get you to purchase those things that you don't need. I think the world has definitely been more fast-paced every single year, but as a result of COVID, I've noticed that a lot of things have slowed down, especially in the fashion industry. There's so many different channels that have just been stopped. For example, like a lot of stores are closed. They can't sell those fast fashion pieces as quickly. A lot of fashion shows are closed or didn't even showcase because of all the COVID restrictions. So I think where this industry is temporarily slowing down, I think it will eventually pick up the pace and be where it was before COVID. I think creatives are definitely at a point where it's unhealthy in the fashion world because there's only so much upkeep that you can take. And I don't think it's healthy, especially of how rapid and how fast-paced everything is moving. There's only so many things a person can do in one day, and it shouldn't be the end all. I hope to see a lot more self-care in the creative industry. A lot of the designers or creators I know personally from the fashion world or the graphic design world, they're all burnt out, and it's so easy to feel burnt out because a lot of the times you don't have that regular 9-to-5 work life. Usually projects extend or the lines kind of blur between time management of your personal life and your work life. So I think a lot of the times we overwork ourselves to stay competitive, to stay relevant in that industry. So I think self-care is a very important topic, especially in this industry where we can't really separate our work and personal life.